A brand new past, or rather post game day week begins, and we look ahead to the final game before Arsenal endure yet another international break. Mikel Merino speaks out, there's kit leaks to talk about, and of course the roundup of the latest Champions League fixtures. This is the Arsenal News Show. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk. Back again with you guys and girls for another episode of what is the Arsenal News Show. Joining you every single morning at 8 a.m. UK time. Thank you as always for joining me and making this a part of your morning routines. It is incredibly appreciated and I hope you've had a fantastic week so far. I know it's been made significantly better by Arsenal's results over the past few days or so. But of course, I hope that you yourself and yours are doing well as well. Thank you to you all. Jumping into the chat box, though. Good morning to Colin, to Blackshine, to Matt G, Glenn, Olawale, Knowledge, Harrison, Shiv, Arasilki, Franklin, NSW, Paul, Martin, Damien, James, Christopher, Stevie. And just a quick shout out to Sir Nicholas. He says, I don't understand why YouTube has stopped sending me notifications for the channel. I've resubscribed and turned the notification bell on and off again and back on again, and it still doesn't send me notifications. So, Nicholas, I have absolutely no answer for you. I'm afraid none whatsoever. I don't know. I'm not in control. But that is also part of the reason why I do the same show at the same time every single day. So you can just set yourself an alarm. Like, you just know when this is going to drop. You know when we're going to be here. So don't get caught out, basically, and just make sure that you're in tune with what's going on. And of course, if we do any other shows, I do try to let you know well in advance. Of course, tomorrow afternoon, 5 o'clock UK time, we'll be doing our preview ahead of the Southampton game. So there'll be plenty of notice for you to make sure you set your relevant alarms for when the shows are going live. Right, let's jump into today's stories after, of course, telling you to make sure that you do subscribe to the channel and turn those notifications on so you never miss a show. We start today's episode with, of course, the latest in the Champions League following Arsenal's 2-0 win over PSG on Tuesday night. The Wednesday games, goodness me, they offered up some drama, some fantastic results, some really big shocks as well. And we're going to talk about all of them. First of all, Atalanta, who, of course, already have taken a point or two off Arsenal, proving that indeed seemed to be a good point. They won 3-0 away at Shakhtar Donetsk in their second game of the Champions League phase. Girona lost 3-2 at home to Feyenoord in a very competitive fixture. Liverpool beat Bologna 2-0. Arne Slot winning 8 of his first 9 games in charge. Apparently no other Liverpool manager has managed to do that thus far, not even Jurgen Klopp. Rather an impressive record indeed for the new head coach of the Reds. Benfica beat Atletico Madrid, not 1, not 2, not even 3, but 4-0 on the night. Brilliant result for the Portuguese side, and Diego Simeone certainly wondering what on earth is happening. Juventus with 10 men beat RB Leipzig, and another scoring game for Benjamin Šeško, 3-2. Sturm Graz lost 1-0 at home to Club Brugge. Dinamo Zagreb drew 2-2 with Monaco, two sides that, of course, Arsenal will be facing in the latter stages of their league phase. And then the two big results of the night, Aston Villa beating Bayern Munich 1-0 at Villa Park. What an amazing result for Unai Emery. And of course for John Duran, who is having an unbelievable season, an absolutely mental season John Duran is having, and certainly becoming one of the Premier League's best young players. And then the biggest result of them all, Real Madrid away to French side Lille lose 1-0. Which creates quite the interesting dynamic in, of course, this league phase. After 2 games, Real Madrid find themselves not in the top 8. And instead, we've got a top spot for Borussia Dortmund on 6 points, Brest on 6 points, Leverkusen on 6 points, Benfica on 6 points, Liverpool, Aston Villa, and Juventus all on 6 points. Perfect record from them. Then come the teams with 4 points. Manchester City in that 8th spot. Inter Milan, Sparta Prague, Atalanta Sporting, and Arsenal and Monaco sitting there in the top 14 positions on 4 points. Down to the teams with 3: Bayern, Barca, Real Madrid, Lille, PSG, Celtic, Club Brugge, Feyenoord, and Atletico Madrid all on 3 points. Then the teams down from 24th down to 28th place: PSV, Stuttgart, Bologna, Shakhtar Donetsk, Dinamo Zagreb, all on 1 point. And then we have the bottom 7 teams: Leipzig, Girona, Sturm Graz, AC Milan, Red Star Belgrade, Salzburg, Bratislava, and Young Boys, all on 0 points. Very, very interesting indeed. And it is turning out as they promised for it to be an exciting, competitive season. And that is a very, very interesting one indeed, and a very intriguing position to see all these different teams in. Moving forwards, and Arsenal's reported leaked colours for their kits for next season, just a few games into the new campaign, have supposedly been leaked. Arsenal's home kit will return to the usual red and white with no other colouring like they have done for the past 2 seasons: gold last season and blue this season. The away kit is set to take inspiration from the dark blue and light blue lightning bolts that we've seen, of course, in some of the 90s iterations of the kit as well. One is certainly of the favourites among the fan base. And then the third kit, which I'm really excited about, is set to take inspiration from the white, gold, and burgundy away kit. If you remember the kit, of course, that Cesc Fabregas scored in the San Siro against AC Milan. Love that kit. It reminds me sadly of Adebayor as well. But I did really love that kit, the white and burgundy one, with kind of the gold pinstriping. And yeah, it was really nice. And certainly one I hope that if this leak turns out to be true, and footy headlines, of course, always providing some really good insight into kit leaks and stuff like that. I think we're in for a very good roster of kits next season. Now, as most of you know, I've done my best to try and come away from social media as much as possible, specifically X. I have engaged in a few things yesterday because I was doing some discussions around an article that I was writing, which I'll probably talk to you more about in part 2. But I saw a wonderful video yesterday while scrolling selfishly through my feeds. And if you haven't yet seen it, I recommend you go and try and find it. Myles Lewis-Skelly, of course, came on against PSG to make his Champions League debut. And the video is that of his family members kind of being in total shock at Myles Lewis-Skelly coming off the bench. If you've not seen this video and you need cheering up, it is a brilliant piece of media. A massive congratulations, of course, to Myles Lewis-Skelly on making his Champions League debut. And it's one of the reasons why, you know, there is still a place for some platforms of social media when it can provide you some feel-good, happy content like that. Now, I spoke to Mikel Merino after the game against PSG. He spoke really, really well, actually. He came out. If you haven't yet seen the video, you can actually watch the full interview with all of the journalists in the Mix Zone on the Haters YouTube channel. I recommend you go over and watch it if you can. He apologizes immediately for his English and then proceeds to speak absolutely perfect English, probably better than mine. He was very, very good indeed. I asked him, of course, getting the first question, which is always a challenge and it was basically like a thing where he was only going to speak for a brief period, so there was a lot of journalists. You're only going to get one question, and usually whoever gets the first question, just to give you a bit of a glimpse behind the curtain, getting the first question sometimes in the Mix Zone it's like you feel compelled to ask just kind of about the game. So if you've got kind of a question in your head, when you're asked to first introduce the question section, often there's kind of a pressure to just get his thoughts on the game. So as it was me that got the first question this time, I did want to kind of angle it somewhat. And so linking it to the game, entering a match like it was against PSG at that specific time for a player making his debut, coming back off of an injury such as the one he suffered, I asked him what it was like to enter the game in the second half with it already in full flow and seeing how he responded to that. And he says it was tough, to be honest. I think it was a really difficult moment to come in because them being 2-0 down, it was the time they were going to put everything on the table and really go for us and risk a lot. Obviously, we had to sustain the lead and try to defend, be narrow, be close, be compact. And I think we did an amazing job there. We could see the commitment of the team, the hard work that we put in, and it was lovely to win my first match. Perfect English. I don't know what he was worried about. He was absolutely fantastic. He was asked by some of the other journalists about the injury. Simon Collins from the Evening Standard asking how tough it was when he was getting injured. And in that first training session, he says it was really tough mentally, to be honest. To come here, you want to have a nice few days to show everybody what you're capable of, to show why they have put faith in you. And then the first thing that happens is you break your scapula. It is tough. It is tough to recover from that mentally. Everybody here in the club was really nice to me, really lovely. And you could feel the love and the support of everybody. Obviously, that helped me a lot in the recovery. And finally, I can say I'm officially an Arsenal player now. I have made my debut and I am buzzing. And then we got a question from Isan from the Mail who says, kind of talk us through what actually happened with the injury, because it was a really strange one. He says it was such an unlucky moment. If you see the action, it's just, I mean, I haven't seen an injury like this ever in my career. But, well, these are things that happen. Obviously, it was not the best timing. But at the same time, I look at the pros on the bright side of it. This gave me a lot of time to think, to get to know my teammates, to get to know the staff, to work on myself and the things that I need to do in terms of tactics, in terms of physicality. And I think I'm a much better player now than I was 4 weeks ago. There was also some really interesting questions about the training sessions, and he was asked about the intensity of the training sessions, and he says it's something that is amazing, to be honest with you. They do some things that I have never seen in my career. The methods they use are completely new to me, so that obviously it takes some time to adapt. But at the same time, I think that when you get it, you're in a different level because they challenge you every single day, not only physically, but mentally. That makes you be sharp mentally, and that's what you are going to find out in the game. He speaks a lot further, but you can go and listen and watch the interview there. You can also read my my own thoughts in my article on football.london. So he's a very impressive fellow. I'll say that, and he speaks very, very well, and I was very impressed. So, and by his performance too, I was very impressed, and I look forward to seeing him a lot more as well. Now, a number of reports coming out yesterday that Arsenal are planning onto potentially signing under 15s player Marcelo de Barros from St Mirren. Reports emerged yesterday afternoon that the player who is in the under 15 side is going to be coming on trial to Arsenal ahead of potentially signing. Arsenal, of course, have put a lot of effort and a lot more emphasis on improving the roster of young players at the club. And it seems that Marcelo de Barros indeed is one of those that they plan. And we know that Kader O'Neill, of course, who arrived from Northern Ireland, is another one of those too. It's been going pretty well, apparently, for him. So they really are kind of improving this roster of young players that they've got at the club. You can improve the roster of your NordVPN by going and getting it. By going to nordvpn.com/Gooner and getting yourself a significant discount off a 1 or a 2-year plan. There's a 4 months extra thrown in free on top of that, on that 2-year deal, of course. And if you're not happy with the service for whatever reason, you can get a 30-day money-back guarantee on top of that as well. It's an absolute must to have a VPN these days. And if you are going to pick one, there is no doubt that Nord is the best one for you, especially because it helps yourself stay safe and secure online and gives you the superpower of changing your geolocation anywhere else in the world on your laptop, tablet, or your phone in the territories, of course, supported by Nord. And not only that, but you can still get your hands potentially on a signed Gabriel Martinelli Arsenal shirt. After his fantastic turnaround of form, there has been no better time to try and get your hands on Martinelli's signature on his Arsenal shirt. Plenty of tickets still left, but there is less than half. So do be aware of that. Link is always down in the description to the competitions page. So go scroll down and make sure you find the prize. There's some instant win prizes as well, including a Gabriel Jesus signed shirt, a William Saliba signed shirt, and a David Raya signed shirt. So best of luck to all of you who have entered, and it's UK only as always. Well, let's go to part 2 and your questions then right after this. Okay, this is part 2 of the show, where we jump into the chat and tackle some of your thoughts on things. Cal says, Tom, did you listen to Henri's comments that Emery would have succeeded if we were patient? I don't know how everyone looks, as he was never going to manage to change the system and the tactics. It isn't everything. So I didn't actually see these comments. So I did a quick Google while I was in the break there to see if I can get the comments so I can read you to them. Henri said, let me find the comments again. So speaking ahead of the Villa win over Bayern Munich, Henri said he's a tactical genius. He always goes out there and makes sure that his team has an advantage tactically because that's how he operates. We all know what he did in Spain, winning the Europa League 4 times with Sevilla and Villarreal. It's no disrespect to what Mikel Arteta is doing, and he's extremely well for Arsenal. But I just thought that if we kept him a bit longer, he would have been a success at Arsenal. He did show it straight after when he left the club. I have massive respect for him. Look, I've said this on numerous occasions that for me, in terms of kind of the order of managers in England right now, in terms of success, in terms of kind of stature, Pep Guardiola is, of course, number one. Unai Emery is number two, quickly followed, therefore, by, for me, Mikel Arteta. And that's based upon the fact that Unai Emery has won a lot of trophies and had a lot of success in Europe with numerous teams and has, of course, done a great job with Aston Villa as well. Arteta, I believe, will eventually overtake him with what he hopefully we see winning at Arsenal. But Emery's time at Arsenal, despite all of those positives and all of that praise that I can land at Unai Emery's feet, it wasn't a good fit. And sometimes managers just don't fit at certain clubs. It wasn't like with Arteta that during our low moments we were going backwards. Under Arteta, we were always moving in a really positive direction. Things were gradually improving. Of course, the pandemic was another challenge that Arteta had to deal with as a new manager in a new environment, trying to overhaul an entire team on a restricted budget, of course, that the pandemic brought with it, which added a different dimension to things for him. But at the end of the day, the dressing room was so fractured at the point that Unai Emery left. I think Thierry Henry, for all of the love I have for Thierry Henry, I think that he is being a little bit forgetful of the scenario that we had at Arsenal under Unai Emery. We didn't have much of a choice by this point. It wasn't like in times under previous clubs that Unai Emery has had. I don't think Unai Emery has really been in a position like he was in the same way with Arsenal. Yes, you could point to PSG to a degree, but it's a completely different context and environment at PSG because as a team, you are the most dominant force in the league. You are relatively unchallenged. And in that sense, it was a very different environment with players like Neymar, of course, and the profiles that were there. But at Arsenal, it was different for Emery and it didn't work out. And I don't think the structure really fitted with him. I don't think the executive level really fitted. Lots of changes were needed and it was the wrong time. Maybe in a different time, it could have worked. Maybe Unai Emery could have worked in a different period of Arsenal's, lifespan. But in the time that he came in, with the squad that was there, with the transfers that were made, with the executives that were there, with an ownership that was there to a degree, and going through a period where they'd only just really taken over fully as well, it just didn't mesh. It didn't connect. It didn't work. And that's fine. I don't think it's fair to say that he would have eventually succeeded because I think it was at that point too far gone and we had to make that decision. At the end of the day, Arsenal are in a much, much better place because of it. I don't think we'd be doing as well as we are now if Unai Emery had have stayed. I didn't see us climbing to as higher heights as we have done so far in that space of time that Unai Emery was here. I just couldn't see it. I couldn't see it because of the tactics that he was using at Arsenal. I couldn't see it because of the players that we were signing during that period with the people that were there either. I just couldn't see it. Whereas with Mikel Arteta, there was always a clear vision of where we were going. There was always tangible things that you could point to as to what was going on. And yes, I had my doubts under Arteta as well. The Villarreal game, ironically, the defeat to Unai Emery himself caused the peak level of doubt I had. But even then, I look back on that now and think how naive I was to think at that time that we weren't going places. Because I look back with the benefit of hindsight and see the clear progression, the clear ideas, the key philosophies that we see fully fledged and fully flourishing now that see us where we are. So, no, I don't agree with Thierry Henry. I don't think he's got this one right. The only thing I think he's correct in saying that he's doing an excellent job at Aston Villa and that he is a very good manager, but I think he has to be at the right club, and Arsenal is not the right club for Unai Emery. King says, Tom, what do you make of Morgan Rogers? I hope that we would try and perhaps get him in the summer. Impressive player, doing a really good stuff for Aston Villa. I think it's been very difficult to get any players out of Aston Villa, King, to be honest. We've already had our hand in trying to get Douglas Luiz. Didn't happen. I think it's going to be very difficult to sign the likes of Rodgers or Duran. I'll tell you what, if Duran has an excellent season, I would not be against the idea of considering him as a potential target in our striker search in the summer. But I think it is going to be very, very hard to get any of those players out of Villa. James says, Tom, I get off from work at 2 a.m. Central Standard, and I used to listen on catch up, but I live for the dulcet tones on the drive home. Shout out to the crew of Arsenal in NOLA. Thank you for what you do. Thank you, James. Very kind comment indeed. Ben says he didn't sort out the issues we had that Arteta did sort out, and that's the difference. Also tried to play out when we didn't have the defenders to do so. I think the difference between Arteta and Unai Emery is really still well summed up by that comment. Unai Emery tried to do things with a team that wasn't capable of doing those things. Arteta changed things to the team and then gradually implemented his processes as he got the players in. And the reason where you can see that so clearly and visibly is the way in which they won the FA Cup. He took that team that was fractured and broken at the end of Unai Emery's tenure. He changed the back line into a back three with wing backs, made us more defensively secure with a limited level of quality, and of course, emphasised those wide areas to get the ball into Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang so then he could flourish in the best way possible and get us to a final and then win that FA Cup. He is now trying to cultivate a dominance. Trophies will come, I'm sure of it, and I'm sure that we will get there and we will indeed lift them again on a regular occasion. But also doing so needs to be done while staying established at the top level, which is definitely what we are doing. Rob says, read the Champions League. Do you think goal difference will make a difference in qualifying for knockout stages? I saw Opta AI predicted 99% chance of top 8 with 16 points and 76%, I think, on 15 points. I think it will, yes, Rob. I think that we need in some games to have really big scorelines to help us in some circumstances, because there are teams that are scoring hand over fist. Dortmund, 7 goals against Celtic. We need to have some big, high-scoring matches in the games to come. And we know that we can do that because we did that against Lens. We did that against PSV. We've scored 4. We've scored 6. We know we can do it against teams in the Champions League. Shano says, I think that we should be happy for Aston Villa and, dare I say, Spurs hitting form. I wouldn't go that far, Shano. Goodness me. We have beat both of them away from home, but I'm happy for them to take points off of our title race rivals. I see where you're coming from. Aston Villa have done very, very well. And some of Arteta's biggest haters perhaps will start talking about it in very predictable ways. But the irony is, of course, that Arteta has already beaten Unai Emery away from home this season. And, of course, has already beaten Spurs away from home this season and nearly managed to get that ever so frustrating result at Manchester City that will maybe come down to the season. We'll have to wait and see. Peter says, what's Duran and Rodgers' contract situations? The only way I see is getting them. They're not in the last couple of years of their deals, I'm afraid, Peter. So that's not the case. Damien says that we should get a hatful of goals against Shakhtar because they are awful. Nick says, would you make any signings in January? And if so, who and in which positions? Only if indeed the right quality of player is available. Of course, I'm looking at the forward line as a key area. I'm also looking maybe at midfield as well, but only if the right players are indeed there. I'm not signing players for the sake of signing players, especially when next summer much better players are going to be more available in a lot more frequency than they are right now, or in January, of course. Tyler says, Tom, I don't get the Mbappe hype. In the Champions League games, he doesn't turn up. He doesn't work for the team. I think he is a slightly better version of Rashford, a one-trick pony, pace, cut-in, and a moody player. I suppose the way in which to convince you that Kylian Mbappe's hype is real is to perhaps look at the contributions of goals he has, considering he is still only, 25 years of age so far in his career. Monaco, in his final season, 26 goals in 44 games 8 years ago. The following season at PSG, 21 goals in 44 games. The next season, 39 goals in 43 games. The next season, 30 goals in 37 games. The next season, 42 goals in 47 games. The next season, 39 goals in 46 games. The next season, 41 goals in 43 games. The next season, 44 goals in 48 games. That's 256 goals in 308 matches. That is ludicrous. That is a ridiculous. I don't care if it's a PSG. You've still got to score the goals in one of the most physical leagues in the world in Liga. It's a humongous number of goals. This season, he already has 7 in 10 for Real Madrid. Yes, he's not perfect. Yes, he has his limitations. Yes, on like the mentality side of things, there are question marks. But Kylian Mbappe is one of the best players in the world. Fact. This is a guy that scored a winning goal in a World Cup final at whatever age he was back then. This is and will be one of the best players this generation has ever seen. And the reality is the numbers reflect that. So that's it. I'm not saying I'm the biggest fan of his character sometimes, but I appreciate him as a footballer. His numbers are absolutely ridiculous. And I won't have the whole French league thing because he does it when he plays for France. He's done it in World Cup finals. I'm sorry, but he does it in the Champions League against some really big sides as well for PSG. So, yeah, it's not just about, but he plays in the French league, because then you're completely ignoring all the other games he's also scored in big elite competitions. Angus says, do you think that we are that far off Champions League favourites at this point? Big sides like Real Madrid and Bayern have looked average this season. We are third favourites, Angus, according to the latest odds. That was the case at the start of the season before any ball was kicked. So I think we're in a very, very good place indeed. Dennis says, why is everyone so eager to slander Mbappe? He is still getting used to playing in a new league and a new system, and the guy is world class. I also love the whole thing of, look, he scored all those goals in the French league. Who else did? Like, which other players scored to that level? It's not like it's just easily done. It's not like every single player that's playing at PSG or playing at one of the biggest sides down history has scored that number of goals in Liga. Like, I hate it when you see that lazy criticism of, he's done it in the French league. Take his numbers and find me somebody else that's putting in numbers like that, even when they're at PSG. You know, find me somebody else putting in that level of number, because you're going to struggle. You're going to struggle. Olawale says, big players have egos, and he has that, and it's not always happy when he loses. Thierry Henry played as one of the most arrogant men in the world, and that was a character trait that made him what he was. The confidence, the self-belief, the ego, all of that created Thierry Henry into the player that he was able to be, the brilliant footballer that he was, and we loved him for it. So don't always attack players just because they are confident in themselves, because if they're delivering on that confidence, why does it matter? RRDM says, we have Arteta. Good luck to Emery. We appreciate Arteta. Henry is doing his work, and sometimes you don't know what you have until you lose it. Hoping that will not apply to Arteta. Me too. Fuad says, didn't he score the winning World Cup goal and score a hat-trick in the last? Yeah. Yes, Fuad. Yes, it's a World Cup final winning goal and a hat-trick in another World Cup final as well. But I don't get the hype. Russ says, how the mighty have fallen. I only recognize one or two of the names in that PSG sub. Really? Really, Russ? That's quite a fair few players. Donnarumma, one of the most successful goalkeepers of a generation. Marquinhos, one of the most consistent and well-appreciated defenders, of course, who've done great things with Brazil as well. Fabian Ruiz just won the European Championships with Spain. Ousmane Dembele, of course, he wasn't there. You know all about him. Barcola is one of the most exciting young players on the planet, as is João Neves as well. Nuno Mendes, fantastic left back as well. Hakimi, brilliant player. World-class right back in his own right. Not the style Arsenal play with, but a brilliant footballer. PSG are no mugs. They are a very, very good team, and they will take some big scalps off some big sides. Not even scalps. They will just beat big teams because they are a big team. Do not underestimate that performance and that victory, because they also have a world-class manager in Luis Enrique as well. So there's a lot of people underestimating and undervaluing players and teams at the moment. It's strange. I think maybe it's an imposter syndrome, like Arsenal now back at the elite level, back at a level of competing at a very high standard. Does that mean that suddenly we just think that these other teams aren't very good? Why can't we just be very good? Why can't we just think that we're great and we're making teams that are also great look relatively ordinary? Can that be a thing? I think it can, and I think that's exactly what this is. Cass says, that surprised me being third favourites in the Champions League. I would say Liverpool and Bayern Munich would be among the favourites behind Real Madrid and Man City. I'm just telling you what the odds are, Cass. Arsenal were ranked as third favourites going into this season's Champions League. Akmal says, and this shows even more how amazing Saka is. Great player, but still very humble and kind. And since last season, he has shown that even with this kindness, you don't need to mess with him on the pitch. I love that altercation he had in the North London derby when Timber was with Vicario, like pushing the players away. Capped him. I love the fact that Arteta gave him the armband against PSG. I think that will make him an even better player. giving him the armband in games where Odegaard is not there. I think that's going to be really, really important for Saka. Mundafat says, hi, Tom. I saw a picture of Kudus in our game against PSG. Do you remember that Calafiori was in our home game in January? Players go and watch other teams play. That's the headline. Players go and watch other teams play. I wish that it was some kind of hint or indication that he will indeed do that. But just remember, he does live in London, plays for West Ham, who aren't in European competition or playing this week. So I don't think it's all that surprising that a player's come to watch a team play another game in the same city that they live. I don't think it's that big of a story. Alexander says, though Emery wasn't right for Arsenal, I do think that some fans are particularly harsh, almost bullied, and it wasn't his fault. I'm glad he's doing well now, and I'm glad that we're doing even better. I think that's well summed up, Alex. I was very critical at the time of Emery, and I am still critical of his time at Arsenal. And I think that's done in a measured way based on the evidence that we saw and we have. But there is context to it that I think I applied earlier on in today's show. And I think he's doing a brilliant, brilliant job at Aston Villa, as he did at Villarreal, as he did at Sevilla. He can only do well at teams with Villa in their name, but he's doing a great job. And he's doing really, really well in all, and has done well in all of those places. Soup says Henry was a much better player than Mbappe, but Mbappe will end his career with better stats. Football is more stat paddy these days. I do think it's easier to score a lot more goals these days than it was back then when Henry was in his prime. That said, Messi and Ronaldo, I think, are just obviously players on a different level that still manage to score humongous numbers of goals across generations and will go down as the two best players of all time. And I do include your Pelés, your Eusebios in that conversation. Messi and Ronaldo are the best players that have ever lived. And I'm not going to get into the debate of which one is better than the other. I have an opinion. I'd just rather not spark that. But they will go down as the two best players of all time. And I think that when it comes to looking at players now and players then, I think it is easier to score more goals now because football is a lot more different. Defenders have very different jobs. And back then, defenders were defenders. Defenders were designed to just stop you. It wasn't all tactical. It wasn't all about wing backs or inverted fullbacks. It wasn't about centre halves playing out from the back. Like, defenders just defended back then. And that's why whenever I get into a debate with someone about who was better, Thierry Henry or Erling Haaland, despite the fact that Erling Haaland is still so very young, it's a very different conversation because of the context of the environment that both of those players played in. So for me, it's just a simple case of those two being the best of all time. Alvamont says, should we try and grab Gyökeres in January? If we wait for the summer, I'm afraid he will be very expensive. He's expensive either way, mate. He's going to cost a release clause either way. There's no difference in that price tag for Gyökeres. And if you pay for the release clause now or the release clause in the summer, it'll be the same. So there's no differences there, I'm afraid. So even if we wait, it won't change anything price-wise. Damien says, Gary Lineker the other day saying he'd love to be playing in his prime these days and he'd score even more goals. And he's absolutely right. You would, because the game is different. And it's easier to score more goals these days. That's just a reality of the sport. Anyway, thank you so much, as always, for tuning in. It is incredibly appreciated. I hope you've had a fantastic time this morning with the show. If you're listening on catch up, thank you so much. If you haven't already dropped a like on the video, please do. I'll be back with you tomorrow morning, rounding up all the latest Arsenal news. That said, it will be a quick show. I'll tell you what I'm doing tomorrow. You're going to laugh. You're going to find this fun. I'm going to Ange Postecoglou's press conference tomorrow, filling in for a good friend of ours who can't sadly attend. That could be fun. Crossing lines and going to Ange Postecoglou's press conference tomorrow. Of course, Mikel Arteta's press conference is also tomorrow afternoon as well. So we'll hear from him and talk about that on Saturday morning's show. But I've got to put the journalism hat on. Got to take the Arsenal hat off for a second and do my job because I'm a professional. But that should be all right. I'm interested. He's a character. You know, we've spoken about Ange Postecoglou on the channel before. We've spoken about him in very glowing terms, actually, and then some not so glowing terms as well. So I'm very much looking forward to that. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning in. Appreciate your time. Have a fantastic rest of your day. Enjoy yourselves. Stay safe, stay well, stay happy and respectful. And as always, up the Arsenal.